Hello, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of the Final Fantasy 16 Spoilercast with the Brothers Take and Last Call Gaming combined for the epic Spoilercast. And of course,
the Brothers Take and the Brothers Craig.
Hey! And you know what that means, guys? It's a spoilercast. We don't need to explain that anymore. It's spoilers for Final Fantasy 16, one of the biggest games of the summer. Now that the summer is over, it's a good time to be talking about it. Hopefully you've all definitely finished your playthrough of this game. It's a long game, but you've had plenty of time. It's a good time to talk about this epic story. And if you've missed part 1 of our Spoilercast, then go check out that first. It'll be linked down in the description. But go check out part 1 first, because that's the part where we talk about all of the dominants and the icons and their arcs in the story and the role they play in the story, which are some of the main key characters. But right now, we're going to be moving on to part 2, where we will be discussing Ultima. We'll be discussing some of the other allies and supporting characters of the game, the overall story of the game, how we felt about the game. And there's a question that I want to ask at the end of this episode, which is, what is now each of our favorite Final Fantasy games?
Oh.
But we'll save that to the end, and we would love to hear from you guys. So if you guys watch this YouTube, make sure to jump down in the comments at any point. Share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this discussion, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, ring the notification bell. And if you're listening on audio platforms, make sure you get in touch on the various social media platforms, whether you want to get in touch with Last Call Gaming or whether you want to get in touch with the Brothers Take. Both are linked in the description down below. Check out the link trees and all that jazz. But without further ado, let's talk Ultima. So we got to start with the big boy. Let's start with him. We mentioned him a couple of times in part 1 because he's too pivotal to the story not to bring him up. The dominance exists because of this character. Eric, I want to come to you first, only because you have said on the Brothers Take podcast, without saying it out loud because you were trying to keep it a secret because we weren't spoilering it, but you have basically said, I knew exactly what you meant, that Ultima is your favorite character in this game.
Yes.
So
and no, in a weird way.
Right.
Like,
so clarify now that you can.
Yeah. Okay. So what an iconic design for me, right? That there's no other Final Fantasy villain that looks like Ultima, and especially not as alien as Ultima. Like we've had aliens with Genova, and Sin is quite an alien design, but this character just comes on and just commands this presence, and the way he talks, you're like, oh damn, this guy means business. And his eyes are so fucking cool. I love his eyes.
Yeah.
And as he just progresses through the story, you're so I just found I was so fascinated by him. I was like, really want to get to know what's his deal, like where does he come from, what's he wanting, what's his connection. And then as the story progresses, I start to go, oh, never mind. You actually made this way too complicated for anyone to grasp. And ultimately, it starts to slightly fall off by the end. But his initial everything was so cool. And his like kind of mind fucking and stuff. And as we mentioned, his constant turning into different people to manipulate Barnabas, like using Barnabas's mother to manipulate him. I don't know why he turned into Kupka in that same sequence.
Right. Yeah, it's all very
naked sitting on his bed. It's a very weird. I don't know why he did it, but
it's a bit odd. Now that you mention it, yeah, okay. I also forgot about that.
But he was so impactful and so interesting. He was really cool, and I just think by the end of it, he kind of loses his potency.
Potency. Oh, that's a good word.
Thank you. I have a dictionary beside me.
Slid in there.
Craig, what did you think of Ultima, the villain of Final Fantasy 16?
I love the name. I love the Ultima, because again, this is kind of an homage to all the other Final Fantasies, and its accumulation of bringing in all the summons and throwing in names like Sid. So the fact that the name of the ultimate villain was Ultima, I already like that, and I agree with you, Eric. The look of him, whatever it is, it was awesome. The voice again was compelling. I love because it talks in a majestic and it's almost acts like it's a know all be all but at the same time, it talks very almost kind of juvenile and doesn't know why you're doing certain things. It doesn't get the concept of like, oh, why aren't you doing
Right.
this? You know what I
Doesn't
mean? So the
understand
way,
feelings nearly.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a really cool concept. But again, like you were saying, is that it gets a little much where when you look at every other villain in this, there's a clear-cut purpose for every motivation that they have. You know why this person wants to do this, except for maybe Barnabas, because obviously he's tied to Ultima. But when you start looking at what he's trying to do and essentially just eradicate the world because this crystal curse is happening, or the blight, and I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, is that something that they escaped? Because Ultima, like you were saying, made all the icons and they escaped from their world and brought magic with them. I wasn't sure exactly what the end goal was, to kill everybody, to enslave everybody. But I mean, I'm sure we'll dive more into it in a second. But as far as Ultima on paper goes, first look, first glance, and the overall agenda of what he was trying to accomplish, I thought it was cool. My biggest thing is that I don't think I'd put Ultima in a top 5 Final Fantasy villains of all time. I think towards the end of the game, and we kind of talked about this in part 1, is that he becomes a little generic. He becomes a little like, oh, I've seen this before. I've seen villains do this before, and you're not doing it in a way that's innovative or creative, or at least in a way that stand out like a Sephiroth is. You know, when Sephiroth does his plan and involves this higher power, it is one of a kind, and that is Sephiroth. Where Ultima, as cool as he looks, at the end of the day, it looks, I mean, is bland, I think, compared to a lot of people like Kefka, like Sephiroth. So I don't know if it executed 100% for me as a great villain, but for the story and what it's trying to do with this whole mythos combination and what the background, what the magic corruption is, it serves its purpose.
Yeah, I really like Ultima as a villain. I like and dislike him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, me too. I think we all do, right?
I think, like, when he first comes in, I was really intrigued by this character, right? And actually, something I want to touch on that you said, Craig, the name Ultima I both love and dislike that, right? I love it for exactly the reasons you said. It plays right into the history of Final Fantasy, right? The only reason I don't like it is because now this character, who is the main like villain of this game, is kind of a Final Fantasy reference rather than its own character. You know, like if you say Sephiroth, there's one Sephiroth and that's it. There's no one else called Sephiroth. Whereas when you say Ultima, to a Final Fantasy VI player, it's the boss that you fight on the floating continent. You know? It's suddenly not the main villain of Final Fantasy 16. So that's the only thing I don't... But it's also a really cool, like, godly-like name, which is what this character is. Design-wise, I love them. His voice is amazing. Yeah. Who's the voice actor? I did look it up before. Is his name Harry Lloyd or something like that?
I tried pulling it up, but I don't see it. I can look it up real quick while you're...
Yeah, because I thought his voice was like really cool throughout. Like, it was really... You could tell it was very inhumane and very sort of emotionless and matter-of-fact. And I think it worked for this kind... I don't always like those kind of villains.
Harry Lloyd, yeah, you're right.
Harry Lloyd, yeah. I knew because I'd looked it up before. I thought he did a great job.
And Mitsuru Miyamoto in Japanese.
In Japanese, which I suppose is the original voice actor. Oh no, this time around they did the English first, didn't they?
I believe they did, yeah. I think they did all the voice capture for English, and then they went Japanese, which is like really unheard of.
Yeah, it's rare. It's super interesting. But I think the problem I have with the character, I kind of wish he wasn't God. I kind of, because I was really intrigued by, I was like, who is this guy? What is his goal? Where does he come from? And what is his obsession now with Clive? And like, I was really into that storyline. I really wanted to know who this character was. That's why I wanted to find Joshua. I wanted to know, what do you know about Ultima? What was that dimension he came from? What does he know? All that stuff. And we did when we were doing our spoiler cast for Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? A friend of ours, Brian Roberts, came on and he said something that has stuck with me ever since. And he said, in every Final Fantasy, they all end the same. You fight God at the end. So when you fight God at the end, I was like, well, God damn it, Brian, you're right.
God damn it.
God damn it, you fight God at the end. And it's I suppose it's just kind of predictable, right? It gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, if Ultima hadn't been the creator god who is evil and malevolent and was something else and there was some other backstory, that would have been more surprising. But the fact that it's like, I created you was like the big twist. I was like, well, I saw that coming actually. Like with all the murals that we saw everywhere and the way your name keeps coming up and all this kind of stuff and how you look and the way you talk, and it was kind of clear to me that you were a god being. And I think I would have preferred if you weren't. But maybe that would have taken the power away from the character. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird that every time I like that he makes that thing, you always fight God, but it's
That's
always
right.
these things where it's like when you're playing, it's like an anime at some point. It's like when you're playing this level of high powered characters,
Right.
you're not gonna then the boss can't be the sheriff at the end of the town. It's got to be something that's
Yeah, you have
epic.
to escalate.
And then when you're dealing with, especially the whole thing that makes Final Fantasy 16 a beauty when you do these battles are these icon battles, right? These huge, big kaiju type battles. And what else would explain that than besides some sort of like divine being? And it's just weird though, because I know he makes it's I was kind of trying to read up on Ultima that he's all the icons are all part of his kin. So, but they've already escaped a world that's already been corrupted and destroyed. So really, how godlike can they be outside of just transferring planes of existence?
Right.
So I mean, I see that he's godlike and he's powerful, but I don't know. I didn't really take it away that he was on that level. He was just this new being that showed that. Yeah, I guess it's kind of you're right. He's showing this kind of I did the Adam and Eve stuff. I've started the magic, so it's just it's a very predictable archetype of a villain.
Yeah, I there's an element of it as well where it feels a little bit like when you play Final Fantasy X, the most interesting villain in that game I would say is Maester Seymour, because he's a guy who's really living in the world, who wants to obtain this horrific power for horrible reasons. Like, he's a really messed up character. Now the actual main villain is Yu Yevon. Yu Yevon is not as interesting as Maester Seymour. You know, Yu Yevon is not as human, is not as flawed, it's just this godly being that you got to fight at the end. And so this game, by the end of it, when you realize what Ultima is, it just kind of feels like Yu Yevon got more lines in the game. But I was kind of hoping that it was going to be more like a Maester Seymour situation, but like post the transformation. Like at one point, Ultima was human or something, and something happened to this guy, and he became this thing. I was kind of waiting for that kind of a backstory where it's like thousands of years ago, there was some dude who became Ultima.
Yeah, almost like Apocalypse in X-Men. You know, I was once upon a time a regular person.
Right.
I'm the first mutant. I have now ascended beyond regular mortals. That would have been way. There's 100 different ways you could have done this than just kind of code him as generic divine being here.
Yeah. They could have done a thing actually where, because he's so alien looking, and if they wanted to disconnect him from all the people, they could have actually had him to be an alien, and that the Blight was actually their way of terraforming the world into something that they could breathe on.
Oh, that would have been cool.
I would have liked that. Hey, it took 2 seconds to come up with
so many
ideas.
Yeah. There's so many ways you could have gone. But I did take it that, but he is an alien, right? His species
from another plane of existence. So I mean, if you want to count that alien,
sure. And they were the magic that they had brought forth the Blight, and it killed their world. So they moved to another world, and they had magic there, and the Blight's following them, and they realized that. So they're going to kind of keep doing this. So I don't think they explained that very well, but in a sense, by killing Ultima and then in the end, of course, getting rid of all magic, they have stopped that cycle of, because I feel like countless worlds would have died in this continuous cycle of moving from one world to the next to just live a little bit longer and the Blight following. Maybe I picked that up wrong, but I don't know.
Well, I'm just looking at it in terms of like, what was the plan then? If they've already left one, if Ultima and his kin are the icons and they're in World X and the magic's come and it's corrupted, the Blight's been there, and now they've left, they've brought that back with them, and the Blight's coming. Maybe I missed that. What really is his plan then? He's because his whole thing at the end, he's like, I'm going to enslave everybody. So it's like, okay, but eventually it's still going to wipe everything out. Like, Was the plan to jump again, or was this the final
That's-
resting place?
That's the impression I got, but maybe I picked it up totally wrong. I think there's many ways you could pick it up. Eric, what did you have a different reading on what his plan was, or?
I didn't realize they came from a different world because he keeps referring to it as a land. So I thought he was just from, like, essentially
He came from up the road.
Yeah,
8 miles back that way.
that's the way I picked up. I thought he was from like Barnabas's continent.
All right.
And that continent got wrecked, and then they just moved to this continent. And
it's just that he implied that he created humankind.
True. Yes.
So I just felt like
did.
With that long process of like thousands of years, I assumed he didn't come from up the road. Like,
yeah, maybe he didn't actually. Maybe I just like completely misinterpreted that.
yeah.
But his plan, I think, was to drain all the magic and all the life from everybody into the crystals. So let the Blight win. But because they made the crystals to absorb ether, which is the life force of everything, he was then going to use that with then Mythos, whatever way you pronounce his name, with all the powers of the icons, use all that magic and ether to then replenish the world. It was sort of the maybe.
See, I had a totally different reading on this because I really thought he was like training Mythos up to be his like Noah's Ark. Like that's going to be my new body that I can live in.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was thinking too. I thought he was trying to get this body, this vessel that he can now be pure in, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe.
I don't know, man.
There's a lot of confusion around Ultima because even like as we brought up in part 1, Joshua encases Ultima in his heart, right? And it's like killing him, and it's a really cool story. But Ultima is also still out there doing shit as like Olivier and hallucinating in front of Barnabas and still showing up and to fight you and stuff while he's in Joshua. So what is Joshua actually holding on to? Or does it just make Ultima weaker? Or does it? I have so many questions about Ultima.
It was a cool scene when he goes to trap him that first time when they all collapse in that cave or whatever, and Joshua's walking out and he's like, and he casts that spell on him. He's like, "Oh, you think this is gonna hold me?" And he goes like, "Oh, this isn't blah 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 fire. This is holy fire or whatever." And he brings them in there. I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." He's keeping them from trying to manipulate Clive. But at the end, it just seemed like he's like, "Okay, I'll be dormant for a while, but when I need to get out, I'll get out." So was it really even a prison, or because what I think happened is Ultima realized that now that they're back together, he's like, "Oh, this might do more for my side than what Clive thinks it's going to do for him. So maybe this is worth letting play out for the time being."
Right. Yeah.
Because maybe, but it's just a weird sequence because he tries to take Clive in that sequence when they're in that cave,
right?
But then throughout the game says, "I can't take you because you're not ready." So it's like, okay, so what were you trying to do at the start? He does absorb him and Joshua puts him in his chest.
Yeah,
but it doesn't do anything because
he's still out there doing shit.
He's still out there doing shit. So it's a bit sort of like they wrote something and then they decided to go, "Oh wait, we still want him to be in it." So they started writing other stuff, and him as a character and his plot. Consider we were just not one of us knew what the fuck he wanted to do with anything.
Right, we all had a slightly different reading on what he was doing, right?
Yeah, ends up like he. That's why I end up not really liking Ultimate, because he just becomes far too complicated and convoluted.
Yeah, but I feel like someone out there has a good reading on this character. Like, I feel like someone will be able to tell us. No, not just. I feel like
somebody read his Wikipedia page.
Yeah. But I feel like someone who has played this game will actually be able to tell us exactly what the plan was, and that I don't know. We just didn't pick up on it enough. Like, someone has played this game 4 times and they know it in and out or something, you know. But I also I thought I knew where this was going to go. So the whole game starts with Clive being forced to fight Joshua and kill him, right? But he's of course still alive. When Joshua took Ultima into him, and it is hurting him over time and it's killing him over time, I really thought, I was like, oh man, Joshua by the end of this is going to be taken over by Ultima.
That's what I thought.
And the end of the game will mirror the start of the game, only this time it's Joshua who's taken over, and you will still have to kill your brother. The one thing you don't want to do, only it'll have a different context this time. And you won't want to do it, but this time it will be final. And okay, at the end Joshua did die, but I don't really know why.
Yeah. Well, he was still suffering from the curse blight. I mean, he
Right.
was still. I mean, him, Sid, Jill starting to get it. The only one that seemed to be immune to it was Clive himself. So all these other guys were still slowly dying from the curse. So I mean, he
Yeah.
was sick to begin with.
Hmm.
But I mean, I'm sure putting Ultima inside of him didn't do him any favors.
So is that why Ultima wanted Clive? Because he's
Yeah,
immune.
because Clive is the only one that
He's
shows
immune to the
immunity.
blight.
Yeah.
But
So
and
so
Ultima.
so now this body can live in any plane of existence, whether there's blight or not. You know what I mean? So they left, as far as I can tell, they
Right.
left that world because that would destroy the gods themselves. It already wiped out humanity, but it's
Yeah.
also going to destroy the gods. So once they moved and they found out that we can make this being, or because I'm not sure how the mythos came into production, but now that it's there, he's trying to make it his main vessel, and now
Right.
he's free of the blight.
I kind of like the idea that the only reason humans exist is as part of a experiment, right? I like that
Yeah, that's
idea
cool as hell.
anyway in stories, right?
That's really cool.
Because then it becomes a thing of the people have made their own, like they've created meaning in their own lives, but it absolutely contradicts the purpose for which they're made. You know, so like their purpose is self-created, because like Ultima, who made them, doesn't give a shit if Martha opens up an inn and looks after people for her whole life, you know, which is on the ground level a very noble thing to do. But in the grand scheme of things, like for him, it doesn't matter at all, because he's like, well, you're just a byproduct of this big experiment, which is to hopefully create Muthos, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the only reason people exist.
And that was kind of what Barnabas was saying. Once he kind of understood the goal of what Ultima's trying to do, he's like, all this stuff doesn't matter. You got to stop applying yourself to this day-to-day mortal life stuff. Because at the end of the day, the mission is to do this angelic calling that Ultima is asking of us. And then at the end, when he has that excellent line, he's like, no, you're not understanding. We have choice. We don't. And again, it goes back to, I mean, if you want to get, like I said in the part one, I'm like, it's very religious and biblical at this point, because it gets back to that point of man's free will. He's like, we don't need to do anything that this guy made us, whether he made us or not. We don't need to follow what he wants us to do. And that's kind of where the Spitfire goes from between Clive and obviously Ultima at that point. He's just like, no, I'm not doing that.
With that in mind, I had a thought when I got towards the end of the game, because they were bringing up choice an awful lot, right? And the whole like the Akashic thing is obviously you take all choice and free will away from people, and they just turn into like this sort of feral form, right? Do you guys think that this game would have benefited from having choices, as in like choice dialogue and choice like Mass Effect style?
I was gonna say on what scale, because unless there's a Paragon Renegade aspect like a Mass Effect, I hate when games give you just 2 lines of dialogue, but it goes nowhere. It's still the same outcome.
Sure.
So like it would have had to have drastically have impacted the game, but at that point you can't do it when it's a single narrative linear path that, you know, there is no alternate ending. So whether or not you want to help somebody out in a side quest, we can get to those later. I don't know if dialogue really would have made an influential change or made it better or worse for the player to play it. At least in my opinion.
But what if they did do the Paragon Renegade thing, and even to the point where, like, you know, at the end of the game, Clive decides to do away with all magic? What if
that's what I'm saying? If that was a choice? That's the only way it would make sense. When you start doing Paragon and Renegade paths, then there has to be an alternate ending. Right. Because if the ending is always the same and it's just a different coin flip of how you got there, then I don't like those type of dialogue options. But if there is an alternate ending of going, I side with Ultima one way, I don't with the other, then that could have been really cool. But at that point, is that a Final Fantasy true ending? You know, there's never really been a split decision at the end of a game.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and it definitely would have divided audiences. But I feel like the game has anyway, and so, you know,
what's one more?
Yeah, exactly. Like, why not? Like, go all in. I mean, it would be a very RPG thing to do, right? I don't know. Like, Eric, what do you think? Would that have taken it too far away from Final Fantasy, or?
I think it's already in its gameplay quite far away from Final Fantasy in its gameplay, not within its world or its story. But that could have actually been really interesting, is because you're helping all these people, right? You get their flowers, or you're finding some old guy who got lost in the woods or something, and there's not really an impact whether you do or don't, other than I think there's a couple of characters that have like kind of a storyline. And then there's one particular character.
Yeah, well, and like items, experience, gold.
Yeah, that stuff. But then if you actually But if you actually help them and maybe that sort of create like a positive impact on the world. So even just by helping people, Martha's Inn starts to develop and more people start to look after maybe the branded and bearers because you're helping. So it's creating that sort of paragon concept. But then if you're not helping people, it creates a negative. Martha Inn is falling into dilapidation. Bears and brandeds, you find them hanging from trees or something because you're not doing your bit. Maybe could have been really interesting.
Or even if you if there's certain choices you make that, and we talked about Sid's daughter in part 1, but like there's choices that you would have made, whether good or bad, that started causing more people of significance to die or not die. You know what I mean? Like that would have been something extremely interesting. If I'm going, we'll talk about like Torgal and stuff like that, but maybe something impacted him or impacted Sid's mid or something like that. Like that would have been completely interesting as well.
It only occurred to me only because it's not like going in I was like, oh, I hope there's choices in this game. Absolutely not. Like I don't expect that in Final Fantasy, like outside of like choosing your strategies and stuff. But it's when it got towards the end and basically Clive was making the point that what's great about humans is the choices we make, and Ultima's whole thing was I want to take choice away. I was like, man, I feel like I should have been given choices to like really hammer that point home. But you mentioned the branded. It's something that we didn't talk about all that much in part 1, other than like say the treatment of Jill and stuff. But like, what did you guys think of like the way the branded were treated throughout the game and the role they play in the story?
They remind me a lot of the non-humans from The Witcher. The world very reminded me of The Witcher.
Okay.
When playing it. And they also reminded me of elves from Dragon Age.
Nice.
And mages.
Good.
Elves and mages in math, like, because I think mages are pretty much shackled. They're put into what's known as circles. So you're essentially like given like a badge or a cert or something to say you are a mage, but you're part of this and you have to be a part of this. And if you're not a part of it, you're known as an apostate and you're hunted down because you're seen as a threat. Okay. So it's very like that. And I quite like that because in Final Fantasy, now I haven't played all of them, so correct me if I'm wrong, maybe there are others, but in the Final Fantasy I have played, magic is just an everyday way of life. Everyone just kind of uses it and that sort of it. No one really sees a problem with it. So it's the first time seeing a Final Fantasy where there's a negative thing to using magic.
Okay, queue up everyone who's going to correct you on that, and they're going to name it all the games where that's not true. But no, I hear you. Yeah, they reminded me of I was reminded of X-Men quite a lot. I mentioned that in part 1 as well, but the idea of like they could absolutely take everyone else on if they really wanted to, but for whatever reason they've decided not to, and the fact that out of fear they've been treated as like the other, I thought it made for lots of interesting themes, and even just like there's a cool little side quest, even like it's horrible, but you come across a child who uses branded as playthings, and
oh dude, that was gnarly.
It's dark as fuck, and but to her, because she doesn't see them as human, like they're just things, they're tools for us to use, and even like the way they're used in the workforce, and like I just thought them wanting to live a normal life, like that's super relatable. So I thought they were made for really, really interesting characters and interesting themes in the story.
Well, I also want to know what's the ratio, because obviously we're thinking like, oh yeah, they could overthrow them, but like when you look at those armies are big and bad and powerful. So like, and again, we're thinking Clive type magic users, we're thinking Jill type magic users. Not everybody can do massive fireballs and electricity, you know what I mean? So
true.
The magic aspect, some of it was just day-to-day living. Some of those people, like at the end of the game when you see those two kids playing and they're playing I think they're playing Clive and whoever else, or they're playing Sid. I want to be Sid. Some of their magic is just using fire to start an oven. You know what I mean? So they're not all battle combatant ready. So even though you have magic and it might be corrupting it, that is why they're shunned. They're not battle mages by any means. So if the army really did want to come in and kick the shit out of them, I doubt it. I don't think it would be that hard. So
That's a
I think
that's a
why that
really
slave
good point. Yeah, that's
well,
a
and
really
then
good point.
also because then Clive, because the branded, right? You get branded, and that's the sign that you know magic. Is that what that was?
Yeah.
That, like you can naturally conjure magic without using.
And
crystals.
then at the end, there was just tattoos that could remove it. Or there was how many people were at the hideout that just had because at the end, because Clive's scars or his tattoos are all gone.
Yeah,
so there
that's
are
right.
ways to get rid of it if you are trying to live underground or in a society that's not showing that you were technically a branded.
They wrote something really interesting about that because I was like, well, if you can do that, why hasn't everyone done that?
Yeah,
right?
and you can't tell that somebody's got scars that go from their forehead to their chin and across their nose. It's like, what was that? Oh, I fell. I hit a door.
There's a surgeon. It's like one of the side quests, and there's a surgeon who's about to perform an operation on a new recruit to remove the brand, right? Which they've done before. But actually, they make note that plenty of people who were branded have died from that operation.
Oh, okay.
There's
I don't
like
know if I did that.
there's like a poison in it that if you try mess with it, it actually releases and kills the person. And so
That's cool.
they have found like a particular surgical way of removing it, but it's really risky, and 50% of the time they fuck it up and it actually kills the person. Right?
So is it worth the risk?
Right. So that's the thing. So the surgeon was basically saying, I don't want to do the operation, right? And the whole point was the other person was like, but I want to have the operation and it's not your choice. I'm willing to take the risk. And the surgeon's like, but I don't want your blood on my hands. And the person's like, yeah, but if you don't do it, if I try it and I'm not trained, I'll definitely die.
Yeah, good as dead anyway.
You know, so it became a really interesting like debate
That's
in
interesting.
terms
That's
like
really
like an ethical like when is an operation not okay, or you know that
yeah,
kind of
because
thing.
you can dive and you can explore that in 100 other ways. But yeah, that's interesting
For sure. So that I think that's why not everyone has gotten rid of it. Like it's not a simple thing to remove, basically.
Well, and it depends on where you live too. Because if you look at where are they from, Rosaria or something like that.
Yeah,
When you look,
yeah.
when you put Clive's dad was running that area, they weren't treated bad. You know what I mean? These guys aren't getting the
Right.
shit beat out of them. I mean, there's that one scene in the beginning when you're a kid, and that guy drops the apple, and he's like, "Pick up the apple, get back in line." And Clive's just like, "Calm down, like no big deal. You know, you're a good
Right.
guy." And the guy kind of looks back at you, and you kind of see this image of going, "Well, if this is how the best of them are treated, then I don't
Yeah.
even want to know how the worst of them are treated."
Yeah. And like
Yeah.
that's the kind of as well, I suppose, because Clive's father was a very kind and warming
Yeah, he was like a
man
Ned Stark.
to
He
them,
was
right?
just
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? I'm kind, I'm just, I'm fair.
And that sickened his wife. Who
Dude.
I just want to talk about briefly now before we move on, right? Clive's
Yeah.
mother, who I think is one of the most vile characters in Final Fantasy. She's not the kind of, like, I mean, I always knew, it's like, well, you're not going to be fighting her at any point, right? But she's the kind of evil that, like, exists. She's not like a magic demigod, super mage, super experiment, soldier character. You know what I mean? She's none of those things. She is
Annabella. I had to look up her name.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
Annabella, that's right. She is just a manipulative, evil person who believes wholeheartedly that her worldview is correct.
Well, yeah, she's that
They're
type of
scary
person
people.
who everything she does is technically legally correct.
Right.
But
In
it's
the world
just-
she lives, yeah.
Yeah, but she just manipulates it that way where you're just like, oh, you are awful and I want to throw a spear at you. But you can't because she's actually, what she's doing is fine. But she's just the worst.
within the means. I just don't understand how this chick who's clearly rotten ends up becoming Elwyn's wife, who ends up becoming the wife of Dion. Like, what is she saying? Unless she's bomb in bed, I don't get what's happening. that she's climbing the social hierarchy of giving these people prints as kids and then she's just fucking useless.
Right.
And like, what are you doing? Why are you worth anything?
Well, I'm really curious about the okay, it seems like with the King of Sanbreque, which is like Dion's father, it seems like Ultima had a hand to play in that. There was a bit of manipulation going on there because he was obviously Olivier
messing with Olivier or whatever.
Yeah, so like he had something to do with all of that, and I feel like Annabella, Annabomb in the bed.
Annabomb ass pussy.
I feel like she was inadvertently serving Ultima. Like she had no. She's not like a Barnabas where she knows she is, but like the things that she wants in life are the things that Ultima wants.
Right.
She doesn't even realize it. So, but I am curious as to how her and Elwyn ever got together. Like at one point, was
That's
she
what
nice?
blows my mind because he's
or
so just.
Yeah.
Or was it an arranged marriage at one point?
That might have been it because I know she
Right?
was like, we were part of royalty. We got to keep the line going. And
She's
again, because I always
obsessed
forget,
with that.
Elwyn's not a king by any means. He's just like he's like the
He's a duke or something, right?
yeah, he's like the duke of that
kick-ass
place.
duke.
So yeah, so she made I think you're right. Maybe it was a arranged marriage, and that's to keep two royal or noble bloodlines together. And then she just lost her shit when Clive wasn't the
right.
the
first
inheritance.
The firstborn let her down. And she
Yeah,
she just couldn't handle it. She treated him like a piece of shit.
Yeah, I think that's what I think. She probably wasn't that bad, at least not on the surface. I think she played her role well. She understood what her role was. But I call almost like Marjorie. Now, Marjorie's not as bad as Annabelle, but Marjorie in Game of Thrones knew her role. She knew what she was supposed to be and supposed to do, so she played that role. And it is manipulating people. So I think she was like that. And then when Clive essentially let her down, the ugly side started to show, and then her and Elwyn became much more distant and more distant. And then she probably then started to conspire with Sam Breck.
Yeah, it's almost like that disappointment was the catalyst that kind of started her down this other path of.
Yeah, and then she probably thought to herself, the Emperor of Sam Breck, he gets it. He knows what's up, and he knows that I'll provide him. Because I mean, look at me, I'm so gorgeous, and like I'll provide him with a king or whatever, an heir, and it'll be good.
And again, and then we go back because we talked about Dion in the last episode. Like the king supersedes Dion with Oliver. And it's again these other things that just go and I'm sure that's behind the scenes. Like if we were watching a show out of this, like a Game of Thrones of it, you would have seen Annabella manipulating the king to be 100%. Like Oliver should be the heir and all these things. So I agree with you on that.
Did you watch Midnight Mass?
Midnight Mass? No, I don't think I've.
No, I recommend it. It's very good. There's a character in that, and Annabella reminds me of that character. She is the worst. You will hate her instantly, but the actress is amazing. Like, it's a great character.
Yet again, she's doing that type of thing where nothing she's really saying or doing or implying is really like illegal, but you also know you're up to shit, but I can't prove it, and you're just manipulating her. Oh, she's awful. She's amazing.
What do you guys? What's it on Netflix or something?
Netflix, yeah.
All right,
just one season, so it's not
good. But yeah, she reminds me of that kind of character, and she's one of my favorite characters in the game because I hate her, but because she's done so well. Like I think she's a well-written, complicated, twisted character, and it's not often that you do that with the mother.
Yeah, like, well, because without her, none of these plot lines happen. You know what I mean? Not only
she's a
Clive's
huge catalyst in the story.
But now Dion's story doesn't progress further in that direction.
Yeah, she's like huge, and the fact that she takes her own life,
dude, that was wild.
It robs you though of finally like bringing her to justice in some way. You know, there's like it's like there's no closure on.
Well, where do you think Joshua landed on that at the end?
Sorry.
Where do you think Joshua landed on that at the end? Because he didn't see the way Clive saw it.
No,
I mean? He didn't get to see the way Dion saw it. So, but Joshua was her favorite once upon a time. Do you think he ever had remorse for her, or did he still just love her?
This is what I mean by you don't get closure, right? There's three characters there who have a different wanting outcome there. Dion wants to kill this woman, right? Clive, I think, wants to like imprison her and like have her suffer for what she's done, or like go through maybe go through the correct channels, but it's like, but you have done bad things and you need to be punished. Joshua, I think, wants to redeem her. None of them get their wish because she takes it away from them in an instant. You know, it's gripping. Like it's a really gripping scene. But
that's a good point though, because I wanted to point out too earlier. This Final Fantasy 16 is not like any other Final Fantasy in terms of how like rated R graphic. There's suicide. You're pointing out that there's suicide in the very beginning of this game. There's people that just get their heads chopped off. I mean, this was a very brutal, guttural game compared to any of the other ones. And one of the things I was pointing out on, I think, our show was the reason I think they don't do a cast of characters in the battle and it's just Clive by himself with a group is that there are no Phoenix Downs. You know what I mean? If someone dies in this game, it's a legit death unless you're the Phoenix. So I think they didn't want to take any of that stuff away with having a cast of characters that fall down, Phoenix down, because there are no Phoenix Downs. There's only one Phoenix, and he gets the down. So, and when when you die and the game's over. So I think that might be a reason, because the more I was watching all these battles, especially when she kills herself, I'm like, dude, people are dead in this game and they stay gone.
Yeah, no, for real. Yeah, that's a really good point about the Phoenix Downs thing. I didn't even think about that as to why that would factor into like the world. Because I mean, Final Fantasy games, the game mechanics are often part of the story. You know, materia isn't just a thing; it's also in the story. You know, so that's a really, really good point. You mentioned why there's no like party members, but there is a party member.
Right, but they don't get hit with. They don't have a life bar.
Oh yeah.
No,
you
I just
want to talk about. I just want to talk about the goodest boy. You know, I just want to.
The best boy.
I just want to gush about Torgal for a second. It was kind of your only actual party member in that you can give him some commands, and he does in some way, like he can heal you or cure you and stuff like that. But what do you guys think of Torgal the Hound as your loyal companion throughout the game? Eric, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
He's the bestest boy. There's no doubt about it. Like, he's the bestest boy. I do think there should have been a party, and that like Torgal was an option that you could have him or not have him. I do wish that. But at first I was doing that. I was using that thing where the others was like sort of artifacts or something, and there was kind of like
the auto command.
That stuff, yeah. So I was doing that, so like he was just fucking ripping into people, but it sort of was taking up a slot. And I think Chris, you told me that Torgal kind of does that himself anyway, sort of.
Oh yeah, Torgal works away in battle. You don't need to.
So I didn't know that. So when I took that off, then he was still doing it. I was like, he is the bestest boy. Look at him.
He is the best. Like,
it's awesome. And then, cause building up to the Battle of Rosaria, where Kupka's laying waste to it. Then there's a bit. Jill is captured. She's about to be beheaded. And at this point as well, I think, Chris, you were asking me about where is Leviathan and all this. And then Torgal runs out and fucking transforms in this icon. Second there, I thought, is Torgal Leviathan? Because that would have been awesome.
They're making everybody an icon these days.
Yeah, I was like, that would have been great. But no, and then he was Fenrir. And I was like, oh, that's another cool fucking reference to a summon from Final Fantasy, is to make him Fenrir. He's Shiva Slipnir, essentially.
But I actually thought for a brief moment, until Harpocrates explained it, but I was like, holy shit, is Torgal a dominant? Is Fenrir an icon? Like, is that where they're going with this? And was the dog a dominant all this time? No one knew. But yeah, what a surprise. Like, I thought it was crazy. Yeah. Craig, what did you think of Torgal? And of course, Fenrir.
Torgal is hands down the mascot of the game, and I think a lot of Final Fantasies you can point out to every game that there's a type of mascot. Torgal is Final Fantasy 16's mascot. Easily, hands down, the best side character. We'll get the side missions in a bit, but like everything involving him was awesome. And then because at first when he turns, I don't know what they even call it. Obviously, he turns into Fenrir, but I don't know. There's the guy that runs all the books in the back of the hideout.
Yeah,
he explains the story of why Fenrir and Shiva were all connected, and I thought that was awesome. My biggest tear is, well, whose dog is he more? Is he Shiva's dog or is he Clive's dog? Because I can see where there'd be a split between who has the ownership of, or even Josh's, because isn't he Josh's wolf in the beginning of the game? So it kind of seemed like Torgal was kind of shared between all of them, which is fine. You know, Torgal has no master.
No,
but as
Torgal's
far as his
dog.
combat. Yeah, I was using the auto commands for a while because I didn't know you could not put it on, and because I was so tired of using the buttons, and there were so many times where I would forget that I wasn't switched to Torgal or my character and be using potions instead of using Torgal's commands. So I left it on there for the rest of it. But I think he's easily the staple of, if you had to make a party, he's always the number 2.
Yeah, for sure. And I like what you said about like he's the mascot of the game. Like when I think of like Final Fantasy 9 and you go, well, it's Vivi, right? Like when you think of Final Fantasy 9, you think of Vivi. And with this one, the
iconic black mage look, right?
Yeah, right. And Torgal, and like it's really cool because I was like, has there ever been a? I guess you could point to Red 13, but Red 13 is actually a sentient being. Like you could do
right? Mont Blanc from like Final Fantasy Tactics, the Kupo.
Oh right, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Moogle. You could do Mont
Yeah.
Blanc as a mascot, I guess.
But I was wondering, like, had they ever
It's an
done
animal
like
looking.
a dog before as like an actual party member? Now I've been playing Final Fantasy VI recently, and there's a character in that called Shadow who has a dog as his companion. The dog's called Interceptor. And I
Oh, the
was
ninja,
like,
right? Is that what you're talking
yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was like, but it's so much cooler that Torgal feels like much more of a character by being a standalone. It's he's not attached to any one person. And like you said, like, it's like, is he Clive's? Is he Josh's? Is he Jill's? No, he's Torgal. He's his own character.
Yeah.
And obviously he can't speak, but we learn an awful lot about the character even though he can't speak. I'm so glad. Because going in, I was like, oh man, they're gonna kill the dog. That's what they do in these things. Like, we've already seen this is a brutal world. I'm so glad they didn't.
This is
Only
John
because-
Wick all over again.
Yeah, only because it would have been predictable, right? Like, it would have sucked and it would have, been sad. But also, it would been like, well, I expect that they're gonna kill the dog because that's what's gonna make me most sad. I like that they didn't. I like that Torgal makes it true.
Well, and it was cool because he was almost kind of like an unofficial white mage for you. Like if you do
Yeah.
need healing,
Yeah.
I mean that was one of the coolest things. Not only was he a constant fighter, you could get yourself to heal. So like a lot of times when you would stun an enemy, like in a fight, that's when I would be like, all right, heal, while I'm smashing the enemy. So like he was a good way to get your health back without utilizing your low amount of potions in the beginning, and then eventually I think you get up to 8 if you do all the side missions. But he was a good way to keep your health in check, especially if you're going to be playing like New Game Plus and on the harder modes. Like he's very important.
I did think when they mentioned that he came from up north, I thought that was going to be like a doorway to traveling north to see a whole new region.
DLC.
Yeah, it could be DLC. But it was one gripe with the game I have is that, because I like the globe-trotting adventures of Final Fantasies. 15 did this as well, where you're in 2 regions of a world, but you don't see the world as a whole. So in this game, like the maps and the locations look amazing, but I do find that, like, whether you're either in grasslands or you're in the desert, and that's it. And it's like, I would have liked like a snowy terrain in there as well, maybe, and just to see more of the world that they're referencing.
Right, yeah, which is clearly where Torgal's from. The Fenrir character.
Yeah, but Torgal is one of many supporting characters in this game. There are many supporting characters throughout the game. But we're not going to talk about all of them. They all have various different arcs and things, but maybe just a shout out to some of the ones that really stood out to you guys. Eric, any supporting characters that you want to shout out in particular?
I actually really liked the doctor, the nurse character. I can't remember her name, but she's the one. Yeah, I know, right? It's an odd one, but she's the one who is the expert on taking away the scar.
Correct, yeah.
And I really quite liked her and almost wanted her to play maybe slightly more of a role in it.
Yeah.
Because she plays nearly as much of a role as that other chap that sort of runs the ship, runs the hideout.
Oh, Otto?
Otto, yeah, she plays as much of a role as him, but I kind of thought she was.
I thought your favorite side character was the blacksmith, Eric. I thought you.
No, no. Actually, the blacksmith's fine. The blacksmith's fine. It's his fucking friend who kept bringing shit to him and making the guy upset. I wanted to throw that guy off the goddamn side of this hideout. Like,
yeah, what was that guy's name?
I can't.
He was
Dickhead. His name was Dickhead.
We've just got Smitty happy again, or whatever his name. What was his name again? What's the blacksmith's name?
Blackthorn.
Blackthorn, yeah.
That's right. So the guy was like, we just got Blackthorn happy again. It's like, hey, I showed him this amazing sword and told him he'll never be able to make something like this. He's depressed all of a sudden. I don't know why.
Can't do this.
Stop showing him shit. He's a fragile man.
So annoyed.
That became kind of a reoccurring side quest, and it's like, you need to make Blackthorn happy again.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 times. It was like, this is ridiculous. Karen was fine.
Sure.
Her design was interesting, but just got to a point where I was like, come on, be a bit nice. You actually have customers here.
Her name is Karen.
I know.
That's the joke, right?
Yeah.
At least I thought that was the joke.
That she's caring about you.
No, that she's a Karen. So she's the kind that wants to talk to your manager. She gives out all the time. She's I thought that was the joke. I don't know.
I liked her Hippocrates. Her Hippocrates is really interesting.
I love Harpocrates.
He's the guy. He's the guy that holds all the books, right? Is that
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he's the one that gives you the story and the leveling up with the little like
With the
8-bit.
Yeah.
Loved him.
I loved it. It's great.
One of my favorite things was just going to him. And you know who he reminded me of? He reminded me of the dude from Final Fantasy X, who kind of looks like Saint Patrick, who walks around and gives you the history of the different parts of. I think you first meet him on like the Mihen Road or something like that, and he like gives you the history of Spira. This guy sounded like him, and it was cozy. I just wanted to sit down and I was like, Harpocrates, tell me the history of this world. I will listen to you forever. That's how he was great.
He was pretty cool.
I found actually Quentin got way more interesting as time went on. He was the leader of Lost Ship.
Oh yeah.
The barkeep. His story got very interesting later on. I didn't like the other
I'm trying to remember who that is. The barkeep from where?
The place is called Lost Ship. He has the most generic, bland, forgettable appearance
Is it
in the entire game.
Is it Lost Wing?
Lost Wing. Sorry, Lost Wing.
Just location Lost Wing, and he's over the inn there. But as it turns out, there's like he crossed some judges or something like that.
Yeah,
and
he was. Yeah,
there was people coming to hunt him
cool.
down, and it was pretty cool.
I don't remember that. I don't really remember him.
But I mean, to be honest, the best supporting character, outside of Torgal, has to be Gav.
what are you talking about?
That was the main man.
Come on,
Right,
my man Gav.
Lame man. Whatever.
You're talking about the guy that loses his eye, right?
Yeah.
Who out of nowhere just happens to be the most stealthiest person that's ever existed ever in the world. I don't get why.
He is your party member without being on your party. Like he's great. I don't know. I loved him.
He was cool. I mean, he was. I just felt like his character went from being like hostile against Clive to like almost being like infatuated with Clive. There was moments where I just thought the way they were talking to each other, I was like, okay, now you guys are like best friends. But he was really cool. I was hoping he didn't die though. I definitely didn't want that to happen.
Yeah. And I think it's a real natural thing that he becomes the leader of the hideout. Like that felt like, yes, it shouldn't be Otto.
And he should have been Sid.
Yeah, I feel like, yes,
Yeah.
you're right.
That's what I'm saying
would've-
earlier, part one. It should have been Sid. The title
that's-
should have remained as whoever's the leader.
Yeah, Gav should have became Sid. And I feel like that's what Sid would have wanted, as in OG Sid before he passed. Because Gav was really like his kind of left-hand man,
Yeah.
So,
I really,
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. No, work away.
Go ahead.
Oh, I had 3 characters written down, and I'd be hate if we didn't bring up Ambrosia popping back up into the story. His chocobo.
Oh, yeah, of
It
course.
actually becomes the steed. I was so excited because I started doing those quests and we'll get into the side quests, but I love how there was a difference between, a symbol that said here's a quest versus ones that were kind of like important that you should do to like move to get more potions or things like that. And when you started doing the chocobo one, I was like, dude, this is going in a cool way. I'm gonna get a chocobo. I'm gonna get a steed, and then it becomes Ambrosia, who you think dies in the battle between Ifrit and Phoenix in the very beginning, because she knocks him out of the way, right, and takes like a rock to the head, or something like that, and knocks out. And then when you get Ambrosia again, who's like the leader of this flock now of chocobos, I was like, dude, this is gangster. So I remember pausing it and telling my girlfriend, I'm like, look, Ambrosia's back. She's like, who the fuck is that? I'm like, it's a chocobo. Thank you.
And you will respect her.
He has a name. And when Ambrosia came back, I was absolutely excited. I was like, cool, because in the trailer, you're gonna get a chocobo to ride on.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't know it was your dead steed when you were fucking 13.
Yeah. And that she has an eye patch now. Like
yeah, dude, right when she got clocked.
Like this is the like we were saying earlier, this game is obviously it's more mature, it's grittier, it's kind of darker for a Final Fantasy. And like
very dark, yeah.
Yeah, of course you get this heavy metal ass chocobo, who's got like an eye patch and a scar and white feathers and leads a gang of chocobos in the wild.
Yeah, came from royalty.
And...
now runs the
Rob's caravans.
Yeah,
for food.
She's a Robin Hood of chocobos. Like she's fucking unreal.
Do you remember what they called her? Something else. She had a nickname that they called her before you call her Ambrosia. It was like the white something.
You're right. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
What was it?
Because that was trying to throw you off. Like, oh, it's the white da da da. But it's like, and he looks at her. Oh, it's Ambrosia. I was like, dude, that's how you do it.
That's amazing. I can't remember the nickname. What are the other 2 characters you were going to shit out?
Oh, we're in my mind kind of the new Wedge and Biggs, which was Tyler and Wade. that you
Right.
that run with you in the very beginning.
Shouldn't
then-
they have been Biggs and Wedge though?
That dude, the moment it started and they were there, I'm like, why isn't this Wedge and Biggs? Out of all the nostalgia throwback names you're gonna do from every Final Fantasy, why isn't this Wedge and Biggs? And
It would have been perfect.
it would have been perfect.
But I do like the characters. Like
yeah, they were both
agree.
cool. They
the
were ride and die. I forget which one lives and which one died. Is it Wade that lives?
Wade lives
lives.
And then he ends up founding the Guardians of the Flame or something like that in the name of the Phoenix. I was like, dude, this because when you're going into that cemetery or whatever it is, and you're about to get robbed and you're beating the shit out of the guys, Wade recognizes you when you shoot the magic, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be somebody. Then he hops down, and you're like, dude, Wade's still running around. So, and then he becomes a new ally that you have to go help. So I don't know. I thought those two plus Ambrosia were three that stood out to me.
Yeah, for sure. The great characters.
Yeah.
I also there should have been Biggs and Wedge. Like
that was
such
a missed opportunity.
For sure.
Yeah, I think this is the first one in a long time there has not been a Biggs and Wedge.
And why? I don't like why. Why
Yeah.
So strange.
Especially when you make two characters. It could easily be Wedge and Biggs.
Yeah. It's like it's right there. Like, and it wouldn't change the characters at all. Like
at all. No.
Keep them the same. Like, but you mentioned, Craig, the side quests and that we'd get to them. I think now is a good time. Actually, I think now is a good time to start talking about some of the side quests. There's a lot of side quests in the game.
Well, can I ask you a question first?
Yeah.
Do you think there's too many? Because a lot doesn't necessarily mean bad. Depending on how you look at it. A lot is just a lot, but is a lot egregious? It sounds like Eric says yes.
Eric says yes. I don't think so. Right? Because you don't have to do them. However, I think there are too many main quests that feel like side quests.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, I like that.
Like, there is huge chunks of the game. Like, the bit where you have to go collect piles of sand is a main quest. And I'm like, I really want to get to the next icon battle. And I'm running around doing, like,
wasting 15 minutes.
Yeah, like, I'm really doing menial tasks here. Which, if it was optional, fair enough, because then I've decided to do it. But I actually have to do it to progress. So I would say, like, because, I mean, you don't have to do every side quest, And then later on, there's side quests that I feel are pivotal that should be main quests, which is, like, the character stuff. Like, finding out Torgal's backstory, or, Clive and Joshua go to get the sword of their father and that kind of stuff. So I just thought it was weird what they decided was a side quest and what they decided was a main quest in some areas. But I don't necessarily think there's too many side quests. What did you think yourself?
What threw me off is in the very beginning, there's a point in the game where I think time elapses or the hideout falls, something like that. Because I was under the impression, and like you can later in the game, you can go back and do all the side quests. There's a certain point in the beginning of the game where if you miss the side quest, you can't, because time goes by.
Yeah,
and those side quests are now. And there wasn't a point that said, at least I don't think there was, it said, make sure you go do everything because something's gonna happen. All it said was like, you can't come back here at the moment. So I hated the fact that I missed a few side quests. Right. And once that happened, I was like, you know what, that I'm not invested in doing all the side quests because now I can't do all the side quests. But
I get you.
As far as being too many, to each their own. I mean, I thought it was fine because, again, if you want to spend more time in this world and keep leveling up and go do all the hunts and on the side do that, there was enough for everybody. But I agree with you 100% that it seemed like they didn't know how to blend what a side quest and a main quest were. And there was this weird lap between the two that were like, why am I doing this instead of that? But like I was saying earlier, I love that there was quests that had a different symbol above them that was like, you don't have to do this, but if you don't, you're missing out on something. So
yeah, the plus was helpful.
Yeah, so like when you started getting more potions and you started getting more items back, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's not thrown in with all of them, and it's not a main quest. It is missable, but it's letting you know, hey, this is something that you should probably check out, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I do. I appreciate that, and I appreciate how easily signposted the quests were. Like you knew exactly when there were side quests available. It's up to you if you want to tackle them or not. Eric, you felt like there was too many.
Just the blacksmith alone had 5. I was like, come on.
Right.
And like, so when you're doing side quests for Jill or Joshua, Ambrosia and Torgal, like that's fine. Like doing side quests for people is fine. But like Quentin had like 6 just for him. The lady of the brothel, she had like 4 or 5 just for, and then you had like the other guy in Dalamil Inn. He also had like 4 or 5. If you don't really find these characters interesting, and you're a completionist, which I kind of was for this game, I was on my phone so often.
Oh, dude, I call those podcast quests.
Yeah, they're talking. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I know that obviously I'm gonna have to either go off and kill something, or I'm gonna have to pick up some flowers, or I'm whatever the hell it is. So I did think, considering all those characters had so many quests, and then there was also other people that had quests, and nearly everyone in this game had a quest, then it amounted to too much, especially when it got to the point where Ultima summoned Primo Genesis. There was a Kashik everywhere, or when he turned an entire city into a giant floating crystal, and you still have 20 more side quests now pop up.
It was a weird time to put them in. I think that the balance between the side quests and the main quests hurts the overall pacing of the game, because I think, like, we've gushed about the characters and like the big amazing points, but I think that in the latter half of the game the pacing is really hurt, because you could go 2 hours before you see one of those amazing icon battles, and you're just going and you think you're about to do it, and then they introduce a whole new character who starts giving you other stuff to do that you have to do first, and you have to go find a key to open a gate, but a kid robbed the key, and you got to go find the kid who robbed the key, but the kid was getting in trouble with bandits, and now you got to go find the bandits.
A lot of
and
backtracking.
you're like, man, I really just want to get to that next town, because I know that in the next town something's going to happen, but you're stopping me from moving on. So yeah, there's a weird balance between the side quests, I think. But like, did you guys have like a favorite side quest? Was there any that stood out in particular?
Well, the main one that stands out to me is when you go make the ultimate weapon with the blacksmith. It has like a weird name. It's like Garden Doden or something.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Got her dang or something like that.
Got her dang. Like that one was cool. And anything with Torgal, I thought was awesome. Anything that felt like I was progressing in the lives of the people I cared about were the cool ones. Anything that was outside of, like, I mean, I don't know if you want to dive into like the hunts, if you count those as side quests. But like,
they're definitely worth mention, yeah.
The hunts to me were awesome. I thought there was a lot of them.
Yeah,
there was quite a bit of. I'd argue that I felt there was more hunts than there were quests that I didn't want to do. But yeah, anything that has to do with the blacksmith sword was cool, and Torgal were probably my 2 favorite ones. Where I'm like, I wasn't listening to a podcast. I wasn't skipping dialogue. I wanted to see how their stories unfolded.
Yeah. What about you, Eric?
Well, speaking of the hunts, actually, that's another character to give a shout out to is the Moogle.
Hey.
He was awesome.
Yeah,
I really liked him.
Dude, the fact that you were the only one that could speak to him and they never explained why, outside that you were the mythos, was like, why are you the only one that could talk to this thing?
And the Moogle would tell you lies, like he'd hint at you having like a certain backstory, and then when you go, really, and it's like, no. No, I just made that up. Like you never learn anything about that Moogle, or if there's more Moogles in the world, or anything. I like the character. He's cool.
Yeah, but, it was way cool.
Favorite quest. Again, I did not like Quentin, and then just when I found out he was a judge and all that other stuff, I was like, oh, actually, this guy is quite interesting. I wanted to listen to him more. I don't know off the top of my head what a favorite side quest was. There was one actually. There was one that was actually quite interesting, which was given to you by those, those scholars that work for the Phoenix.
Yeah.
They give you one to go find one of their guys who's in a town in Waloed, and you go there, and all the people in Waloed are like praying to be made a Kashik. Yes. I thought that was a really interesting,
fucked up quest.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting quest. The one I cared about the least was the guy in Dalamil Inn.
Oh yeah. I know the guy.
Which one was that?
He's like he's like a merchant down there. But it turns out that he is he's been hiding that he's got magic all along, and they don't know that, and then they find out and they want to like exile him from the town, and like the townspeople that gather start throwing rocks at him and stuff, and then like there's these 2 kids who like love him, who like run up to say please leave him alone, and they end up hitting one of the kids and everything,
Oh
Like,
yeah, see, I didn't do all the side quests. So I think I
right.
missed a couple of good ones.
Like there is some, especially towards the end, there is some really good stuff, but it's in the wrong place. So it's like I could talk about how positive the quests are, but then you're also like, yeah, but also the world's about to end, so none of this matters. Like, this
Yeah,
is
and
like,
this the problem is that a lot of these people, they're finishing up their quests when essentially you have meteor coming down. You know, when essentially it's
Yeah.
like Unicron is about to devour the entire world. Like it's completely it's like this is
it
not
just
the
should have been a bit
time.
earlier in the game. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one that I remember, and I'm glad I remembered it. I don't remember if it was my favorite quest, but I remember when I beat it, the quest was called Cock and Ball. You guys remember doing that one?
What's that one?
It's I trying to remember exactly what you had to do. I think because you had to do a couple different quests. It says upon completing the Home Sweet Home main quest in Final Fantasy 16 and beginning the Gathering Storm, Clive will gain access to a new side quest in the new improved hideaway. The side quest is entitled Cock and Ball, and it can be started after Clive interacts with the reading table in his chambers and reads Gav's letter. So I forget what you're trying to do. And I remember beating it. And I'm like, dude, that is. And I'm like, wait, because it's spelled Caulk, like cock for like making stuff, and then ball Bawl. But I remember reading it, and I lost it, and I was like, that's
so funny.
That's going down as I can't believe they got away with that. Their quest is called Cock and Ball, so that's my new favorite quest.
But there's like loads of times in the game where Gav made me laugh out loud. Like Gav's voice actor is so fucking funny.
Yeah,
just the way he says things. He reminded me of there's an English comedian called John Richardson, and he has the exact same accent. And I was like, I even looked up at one point, did he voice act him? He doesn't. But I was like, in my head, I was like, it could be. Like,
it could be brothers.
It is just so funny. In terms of favorite side quest for me, I think I enjoyed the hunt so much, and I think there's one hunt in particular where you have to fight this massive dragon. I can't remember what the name of it. It's one of the hardest.
Yeah, because I did beat all the hunts, so I know what you're talking about.
Right?
Yeah.
I just thought that fight alone was just an epic boss fight.
Dude, a lot of people were saying if you go into that thing like underpowered, it was the dragon and there was the chimera, I think. And some of them are like, if you're underpowered, they're just as hard as like fighting a main boss.
Oh god,
you know what I mean? Yeah.
But that was just such a great fight, and I wasn't expecting that much spectacle from a hunt. Like the other hunts were good, they're fun, but I feel like that one had more flair to it. So like that one really stands out to me as like an optional thing that I'm glad I did it. Like,
is that the one by the water when you come into that alcove and?
Yeah, it's kind of like on this beach type thing.
Yeah. Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about.
He just lights up the whole place. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah. Did you ever die from any hunts?
Yeah, I died first time fighting him. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That was a tough one.
There was definitely one or two others, but
not him, but the chocobo that just rains meteors down on top of you. That guy.
That guy fucked you up.
Well, I told you guys in part one that I died in the very first hunt because I forget like when you first get
the goblin
hunts. Yeah, it says, dude, I don't know what movie he did, but he did something, and it just popped me, and I was like, well, there's no way they're this hard, and then I went back and walked them, but I thought the hunts because Andrew was talking to me because he doesn't have a PS5, so like he likes to. Like when I'm playing God of War or Horizon, he likes to keep tabs on like how is it going? What are you doing in it? And he's like, I know this one's some people compare it to like FF12 a little bit. He's like, but are there hunts in it? And at the time, because I forget when the hour kicks in, like what hour mark kicks in for the hunts. It's fairly early. I'd say it's in the first like act or two. And I finally got it. I'm like, yeah, there are hunts in this game, and I didn't think there was going to be that many, and there were. So
yeah,
if anyone's interested in hunts, yeah, this game has them, and there's plenty of them. And I like that. I don't know if you guys looked up how to find them, but like it's kind of vague on where they are. It gives you kind of like these points of going, oh, it's kind of by this and kind of by that. You got to go find it.
It reminded me
of. It was cool that it wasn't like on your map with an X.
It reminded me of like those treasure hunts in like Ghost of Tsushima, where you're getting a vague idea of the location. You have to literally hunt it down.
Yeah,
it is pretty cool. I have to admit, I was a bit bold and looked up guides now and again.
I looked up the shit out of them.
Yeah.
Daddy ain't wasting his time on going to look for hunts, baby. I was just like, nope.
When I got towards the end, I was like, now I just want to like rack them up and let's go. But
well, because you also want all the points because there's the guy in the hideout. The more points you have, he'll give you those items
for sure.
So I'm like, well, the only way to get a bunch of them is to knock out all the hunts because they give you like 1,000, 2,000. Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to waste my time doing it. But if you want to, it's fun to kind of go explore.
Also, there was some that just had question marks. So I was like, well, I can't even guess where you are, so I gotta look up. Like
Yeah, what
Svarog
is-
was question marks, and I think another like one of the fallen giant mech things was just question marks. So I had to look them
Sure.
up. And then there was one which was I think it was a chimera, I think, or some other creature. No, it wasn't chimera. It was some other manticore. There was a manticore. And
Oh,
it just
yeah,
said
yeah.
it just said Dalmatian Desert, and I was like, there is 3 of them.
How big that is. Well, I was gonna ask you guys too. How did you like the because we didn't really dive into that. How did you like the kind of robotic sentient beings that were kind of meshed in with
yeah.
the fantasy world? Because once you brought up that hunt, yeah, there was a couple of hunts that were like, and again, you have to do this with Clive, and you meet like the robot kind of things.
Yeah.
Did you like that blend in with the enemies compared to all the other kind of traditional medieval fantasy type characters?
I thought I liked them.
It kind of took me out for a minute.
I knew that there was the Fallen from looking at all the different like promo stuff building up to it. So I liked them. I was interested in them. I liked that lore of the giant crater with the water falling into where there was a
it's
crystal
amazing.
Oh
there.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like the war with the
You know how
Fallen.
many people took pictures
Oh,
by
God,
that thing?
everyone.
It was
I
like going
did-
to
I
like
did,
Niagara
yeah.
Falls or something like
Yeah.
that.
It's beautiful.
And then it kind of just later on got like Ultima convoluted, where it was like, okay, so Ultima made humans, and then they advanced into the Fallen, and then there was a war, and then they became primitive again. I'm
Yeah.
confused with where the Fallen fall into it. So then
Mhm.
it got a little bit like, I don't think the Fallen were actually necessary because they didn't play that much of a role.
Yeah, I did
into
think they were
into
going to
the
play
world.
more of a role into the story than they do. I like the
I mean,
idea.
they were cool to fight for sure.
Yeah, they're cool to
Mm.
fight. I like the idea. I'm actually like a sucker for things like that you're not nearly expecting. Like it's medieval, and then all of a sudden you open a door and there's robots. You're like, what? Like it kind of. But I didn't love the design of them, to tell the truth. But I kind of worked with the aesthetics of like the ancient temples and stuff like at least they
I
had
love
a
the
design to stay
architecture.
true. But the architecture is amazing.
Well, I liked the big ones, all the bigger ones that you fought. It was
Yeah.
it was kind of the cannon fodder small ones that were just kind of like bland to me.
Yeah, for sure. We were talking there about like the side quests, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, but obviously it's the main quest really that is the highlight of the story, really. And I'd love to ask you guys what you thought about the ending of the game. We're getting to that point now. Not just how Clive ends it, but then also there is an actual epilogue to the story that is the ending, and people have a different read on that scene, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about it as well. So just first of all, that Clive decides to eradicate magic from the world. What do you guys think of that?
Well,
I didn't care for it. Oh, I'll let you go first.
sorry, just that's where it was heading, wasn't it? That's kind of, they told you that's that's essentially, we got to destroy the One Ring, and by the end of it, they destroy the One Ring. So you're like, okay,
Right.
that's grand.
Yeah, I suppose with the whole let's destroy the crystals thing, because the magic that they produce is actually, it sucks, right? Everyone's living a bad life, and we'd be better off without it. It kind of does suggest that his end goal is, yeah, we'd all be better off without magic. Yeah, what were you saying?
And I
Greg?
looked at it as and again, we can talk about the epilogue too, but it's like destroy what made magic corrupt. You don't need to get rid of magic per se.
Sure.
Like, if you're able to get rid of this thing and handle these things in a certain way, then I don't see a reason why. Because magic is what made their world, right? Everyone, magic is what they've been based on. The fact that now the crystals are gone means that there's nothing to pull and siphon the energy from the world to destroy it. So if these are gone and there's a way to keep magic, I would never want to live in a world without it if it was already in it, especially when the majority of people are good people that were using it for like everyday use. And at the end, when they're starting the fire in the kitchen, you know what I mean? It's little things like that. It's like, yeah, magic is extremely useful. But is that where you want to end it for this until we move on about how the magic ended?
Well, it's so interesting that like because he essentially becomes God at the end, right? Clive does. He like replaces Ultima, and now it's his decision
Right,
what
he,
to
like,
do with the
ascends.
world, right? He ascends to that point, and he decides, well, let's do away with magic. But I think you're hitting on something interesting where, because his whole thing was like, we should be able to choose how we want to live, right? We should be able to live on our own terms and die on our own terms. That becomes like the big theme of the story. But he makes that choice for everyone without, giving anyone a choice. He takes magic away from everyone.
It's very
Now,
tyrannical of him.
in a way, like, because okay, maybe it is for the greater good. Maybe they're better off without it, and maybe it means that the blight will never come back because it feeds on magic. So that solves that problem. Power forces like Ultima can never come back. You know, wars with magic can never be fought. But at the same time, you bring up a good point, Craig, of like this is how people live, though. Like they actually use this as their way of being. But as the epilogue shows, they just light fires the old-fashioned way. So there is a way of living without it, and they seem to. But
Yeah.
the question is, and see, some people have different readings on that scene. Is that epilogue hundreds of years into the future where the characters of the story have become myths and legends to them? Or was the whole game not real?
Oh. I don't think I've heard
Was
that
the
part.
whole I was listening to, like, I can't even remember where I heard it, but I was listening to another podcast where they were like, because it shows the book as well, written by Joshua, right?
Yeah, actually, not fuck. I forgot about the book. Yeah, it is. They
So-
do kind of make it like a tall tale.
There was someone making it out that, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm Clive, I'm Joshua," and they're out fighting. And
Especially when Joshua showed no interest or no reason to be documenting his tales. It was never like he was a bard and he was trying to be like, I need to make sure that the history never forgets about this.
well,
Out
plus,
of nowhere,
like,
it's just this book written by fucking Joshua.
and Joshua died, right? So he didn't write that book, or did he?
Yeah, interesting.
Right,
Well, maybe
so-
there's a Sid and now there's a Joshua.
So one reading of this, it's not what I don't buy it myself, but I just wanted to throw it out there to see what you guys think. But one reading of it was that the entire story of the game is this fable that these kids were reading, and that none of it really happened.
I mean, I don't hate it. I don't like it. But I mean, it's the game's called Final Fantasy. You know what I mean?
I'm under no illusions. I know it's not real.
At the end, no, I mean, in terms of like, it's a fantasy. At the end of the day, if the Final Fantasy is this epic old tale that was told, and then you just play it, I mean, it kind of has its own coolness. But I don't know. I don't like that at all. But I'm not opposed to it. That theory, because I'm sure it's a theory at this point.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it's absolutely not like what anyone has actually said is like what happened. But Eric, what do you think?
I think if that was the case, the best thing to have done would have been to hint at it, kind of like in the Witcher 3 game. Dandelion, or Jaskier, if you watch the show, narrates some of the parts of the stories. Right. So you have these moments where it's this like animated drawing, and you have an old Dandelion narrating it. So if you had that where Josh was narrating it, then it's like, here you have the book, and it's like, there you go. It was a story, maybe. But yeah, I don't really like it because it comes out of nowhere. That's almost like and it was all a dream, kind of thing, where it's like it doesn't work. And also, if that was the case, God, Joshua was sum up his own hole to make himself the icon of the fire, and he was able to trap Phoenix or trap Ultima and live forever. But I prefer the idea that he just sort of documented it. But if he was documented, they should have shown that too.
Yeah, well, what if it would be cool if you would have been able to find, like, in the spine, like if it was an Easter egg and you weren't, what's his name? Hippocrates?
Yeah.
If you were to go to his library and you were to find that spine of the book in his library, that'd be a cool
That'd
Easter
be really
egg.
cool.
Yeah.
That'd be something kind of cool. And if he was like the narrator, that'd be something that I'd be way more being like, oh, this Keeper of Tales, Keeper of Knowledge.
I feel like if his name had been on the book, there'd be nothing to debate.
Right.
Yeah, it would have been better.
Right, because he's the storyteller. My whole reading on that whole scene anyway was just that we're hundreds of years later, everything did happen, and these kids are now like looking up to those people from history as heroes of the past. That was my reading on it. Like the legend will the legend lives on kind of thing, right? And like, okay, so maybe some of it has been exaggerated or whatever, but that it really did happen in this world. It all actually happened. I suppose then I just want to ask, we're going to finish this on asking what's your favorite Final Fantasy, because I'm really curious, because I don't know what yours is, Craig. But I just before we do, any kind of final thoughts that you'd like to say on Final Fantasy 16 as a game, as we bring the spoiler cast to a close. And this was super fun, by the way. And for anyone listening, thank you for checking in, and make sure to share your own thoughts. But final thoughts or closing thoughts on Final Fantasy 16, if you have anything to say that you haven't yet got to.
I'd be curious because I know we've been, especially in part one, we were kind of kicking around ideas of DLC and how they've said there won't be DLC and maybe there will, maybe they won't, and we kind of had some ideas of what would be cool DLC. Would it be because I never really cared for it. We joked around like Final Fantasy X-2. If they made a second part, would you think it'd be more DLC or like a Final Fantasy 16-2?
Oh,
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think I would prefer DLC personally.
In like blocks and chunks instead of maybe just like a 40-hour prequel.
Instead of one full sequel. Only because I think you get the story better that way. And personally, I don't think the sequels have been great. You know what I mean? Like I didn't like 10-2. I mean, it paled in comparison to 10. And then like the 13 trilogy, it didn't really work for me either. Like I always feel like the Final Fantasy games work best when they tell a very complete story. And then when they try to do a sequel to it, it's like, well, we kind of finished the story, so where do we go from here? And then it always feels like a lesser experience. Like when you play 10-2, there's no sin, there's no real threat to the world. It feels way smaller. That game actually feels like a DLC.
Right.
So to me, a DLC would work better for expanding this world, but that's just my take.
No, yeah, I think you're on the ball because they do end it, like, because there's no magic, there's no dominance, there's no Ultima, there's no crystals, there's nothing afterwards. So if you told a 16-2 where it was a sequel, then what you end up having is you just have, like, I don't know, the Kingdom Come Deliverance. Like, you just have a medieval game.
But what if it's a prequel?
If it's a prequel, then it runs into the problem of I think it would run into the problem of, well, not the big things aren't being resolved because
but if we were to take those DLCs we talked about, like turning Leviathan and things like that, and
DLC is fine. So
but how long? But if we want a DLC on Leviathan, do you want it to be 8 hours or do you want a 25-hour game? And at that point, would you make it a number 2 prequel or keep it in chunks of DLC? This is just kind of where I get weird.
Yeah.
Do I have to buy 3 different things of DLC? Or if there's enough content, why not just make it a standalone?
I hear what you're saying, and like, does it become like or even like maybe it's not a 16-2, but is it like a Miles Morales, where it's like it's not a full length game, but it's kind of a game. Like
they sell for $40. It's 30 hours.
Yeah, it's a little bit shorter and it's a little bit cheaper, but it's not DLC, but it's not a sequel, but it's not a.
Yeah. But the more we've been thinking about it or talking about it, I've been kind of, because you guys, when we've been talking about DLC, I'm like, where would I land on that? Like, do I want a game or do I want to spend? Because sometimes DLC is ridiculous. Sometimes it's $30 for 8 hours, and it's like, well, at that point, why can't I spend 60 for 30 hours?
Yeah, I totally get you. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I fall on, even if they were to do that and make like a Lost Legacy or a Miles Morales sized game, I would still hope that they don't call it 16-2 like that.
Right. That's placeholder. That's placeholder.
Right. That it's Final Fantasy 16 subtitle because it's a prequel and it's not
Final Fantasy 16 Lost Leviathan.
Yeah,
great.
Like perfect. That's perfect, and it already has a hook now because everyone who played it was wondering what happened to that other dominant.
Yeah, because it was blowing my mind. I'm like, wait, where happened to Water? And then you get to that temple and you're like, oh, lost. He's the one's missing. I'm like, you've got to tell a story about that because you didn't purposely not write it in the lore for me not to ask a question about that.
Yeah, like when that came up, I even went to Hippocrates to see would he tell me about Leviathan, and he doesn't. I want to know, and I feel like that is. They said that there's no DLC planned. I don't buy it. Bullshit. I think they said that because people really weren't happy. Like when 15 first came out, and it felt like such an unfinished experience, and they were like, "We've got loads of DLC coming." People felt like that was a real like just trying to take money off people. Like it's like, why didn't you just put it in the game? Like it's already an unfinished game. There's so much content missing from this, and like you planned specifically to hold back for DLC. So I think
this is so big and complete.
Yeah, and by saying, "Oh no, we've no DLC planned," going in, people knew they were getting a full package then. But now they could turn around because it's been successful and say, "Okay, we've got some DLC planned," and I think it would do well. I think like people would jump on that. Sure.
I'd buy it. I don't buy DLC. I would buy 16 DLC.
There you go. That's that. Well, there you go.
I think if they did it as a DLC, the best thing would do would treat it like an expansion, like Heart of Stone or Blood and Wine from The Witcher 3. Like, because sometimes they can be quite expensive, and like you said, you're getting fucking nothing out of the DLC.
Right.
So if they were just to do it as DLC and not like a Miles Morales game, then at least make it like a proper expansion.
Yeah,
For sure. Right, get working on it, guys. Get that expansion out there. Any other
Lost of Island.
Any other final thoughts on Final Fantasy 16?
that was mine.
That was a very good one. Not really. I think I've made most points.
Yeah,
to make.
Yeah, I'm really happy with like the conversation that we've had. My mind has been changed on some things. I've been thinking about other things that I didn't think about before. So
Eyes have been opened.
Interesting. Eyes have been opened. But like I enjoyed this game. I enjoyed the story.
Game of the year?
Not for me personally. My game of the year so far is actually Resident Evil 4 Remake.
Oh, nice.
But I'm curious to see now how like Starfield and Spider-Man 2 and all go. So we'll see where it goes. But,
Mortal Kombat 1 still coming.
Yeah, oh my
dude.
god, like insane.
Yeah.
But just to finish this off for the fun, why not? We're all here. I want to know your favorite Final Fantasy game, and maybe it is 16. I don't know. Maybe that's how much you guys loved it. I don't know. But what is your favorite Final Fantasy game to date? So far.
Who are you asking?
Both of you, everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone.
All
But,
right, 1, 2, 3. We'll go at the same time.
I'll go to you first. Craig.
Mine Final Fantasy 7, and I hate to sound generic or cliche. It was
It's the right answer.
my first introduction into real RPGs, and so catch me on the right day because it switches between my favorite game, Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, got me into RPGs. Nice. Final Fantasy 7 is where I went with that take. So I went from going to a nice foundation, a nice building block of learning how to do not timed hits essentially, but like turn-based combat, getting party members, leveling up, using potions. And then I go to Final Fantasy 7 in 97 and it just blew my mind. And it's funny because my brother's favorite game is Final Fantasy 8 or his favorite Final Fantasy. So like he watched me play 7. I watched him play 8. And for me, it just cemented it. I'd argue I love 7 Remake, but I would hate to piggyback off of 7 because you can't have Remake without 7.
Yeah.
If I had to say a close second, it'd either be probably FF6 or FF12.
Cool. Okay.
Very good.
And actually, fun fact: when you mentioned Final Fantasy 8 there, and we've been talking about 16, Ben Starr, the voice actor of Clive Rossfield, his favorite Final Fantasy is Final Fantasy 8.
Nothing wrong with that, man. What I don't get to is like if you like games, I hate when people like go, oh, that one sucks, this one sucks. Not that I hate that person. I hate the argument because I'm like, dude, they're all awesome. And one of the interesting things that I forget who said it. They're like, generally speaking, it's however old you are, because there's a difference between if you're 35 versus 30. Like Andrew's closer to 30. He likes FF10 a lot and FF9.
Makes sense.
Right? So it's one of the first ones you played versus backtracking. So for me, the first one I played was 7. And you can never have your mind blown like that again. So if the first one you played was 9 and 10, that's mind blowing. So when you go back to the older ones, mine's pre-blown. They're still great, but it'll never be that first taste of awesomeness. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But for me, it was 7, and I just don't know how anyone, even if it's not your favorite, I don't know how you don't love it.
Yeah. Nostalgia for sure plays a huge part in what your favorite Final Fantasy game is. But you are right. The games are all so unique that if anyone has a favorite, you can't tell them they're wrong or anything. Like there's a reason they connect with that game and its unique world and its unique characters. Eric, your favorite Final Fantasy game?
My favorite one would actually have to be Final Fantasy 7 Remake.
Nice. I would put that in the same list, but for me, they're one and the same.
Yeah. I when you say it, it's like I totally get it. Just for me, I think I completed Remake before I completed 7. Now I knew the story of the original.
Back to play 7 again.
I went back to play 7, so I knew the story of 7. I knew most of it. I knew most of the story beats because we watched Adam, the oldest one of us, play the game, so we saw all the big story beats. But I think I played Final Fantasy 10 more because, again, like you were saying, it's an age thing. So I think I was able to get in 10 more based on the fact it was PS2.
And the first time they're talking in 10, you're like, whoa, they can talk.
They can talk. Yeah. It's amazing. And it was turn-based, so it was a lot easier.
I love it. I love it so much.
But with I've put so many hours into Remake, and I just love that gameplay, the graphics. They got the voice acting so right. The mute, like, I cried when I saw Aerith's house of just joy
Yeah, it's amazing.
because
it looks so good.
it brought me back to when I saw Adam playing the original and going to Aerith's house.
Yeah.
So it brought me. So even though I didn't play it, it still brought me back. So I put Remake based on its more advanced, I suppose, because I'm young.
Yeah, no, cool. Look, it's no secret. Anyone who's ever listened to our podcast before, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite Final Fantasy. It's also my favorite game of all time. I won't bore you with the reasons why. Like, it's just the most incredible game I've ever played, and I don't think, and it is that thing of like the first one you experience, and I think you said it best, Craig. You can't have your mind reblown like that.
Right.
And
It's
Final
reblown.
Fantasy VII blew my mind at like every turn. There's just
The
so
moment
many.
the moment he hopped off the train, I
It's
was
just
like,
fucking amazing. And the moment you leave Midgar and you realize that's not the game, and the moment you find a snake impaled on the tree, and the moment, like, there's so many, it just keeps going. It's just such an incredible journey. But that's just our favorite Final Fantasies. We'd love to hear yours, guys, and we'd love to hear all your thoughts on Final Fantasy 16. Maybe this was your first Final Fantasy, and maybe this was the one that blew your mind. We'd love to hear all about it. So if you guys have been watching this on YouTube, please jump down into the comments to share your thoughts on Final Fantasy 16, on Ultima, on what his goal was. Explain to us, because we clearly don't fucking get it. Tell us, what was this really about, and what did you make of the ending? What did it really mean? We'd love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed this discussion, please give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, ring the notification bell for all future content. And to those of you who are listeners on audio platforms, make sure you touch base on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, X, what are we calling it? So Craig, where can people find you?
You guys can find me personally at Craig Perales on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter X at Last Call Productions. And if you're looking to follow any of our YouTube content, that is at Last Call Gaming.
And you can follow us at The Brothers Take, and make sure to check out our link trees too for both podcasts. They're down in the description. Make sure you're subscribed to both, follow both. Weekly podcasts, amazing podcasts. Craig, I want to thank you so much, not just for coming on and doing this with us, but also you got in touch with us first in the first place anyway. You're one of the first people to ever contact our podcast and to follow us. We followed you back, and I love watching your content. I love that you guys watch our content. The support from you has been fucking amazing. So thank you so much, and I've really enjoyed.
Man. My pleasure. I'm so glad we got to do this, guys. Because again, I'll send you Twitter pictures. I'm like, dude, I'm going through your episodes. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Well, I forget, not to get off topic before we close, but like when I found you guys, and I forget if it was on Facebook or something, and I watched a couple episodes. I'm like, dude, I love these guys. Like, I love everything they're saying. They talk just the way I like about games. So I'm glad we eventually hooked up. I'm glad it was a mutual friendship that we were able to nurture out of this. For and sure. I can't wait to do more of these and have you guys on our channel as well.
Definitely. Yeah, we got to do more. So thank you so much for doing this, guys. That's all for the FF16 Spoilercast. But keep an eye out for more collabs and more content in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.